911, what is your emergency?
Units respond code 3 to a 1050 on the highway. Vehicles are blocking multiple
We're en route
lanes
to the
of travel.
hospital. Patient is currently having
We've got a
cardiac
4-alarm
arrest and has
fire
been
here.
intubated.
Send
Protesters
additional
are outside
trucks.
of City Hall and they are not complying with our
Out
orders
on one.
to
Hold the
disperse.
air.
In a rapidly changing world for first responders where it seems that every day the rules and norms are changing, there is one voice you can count on to give you the latest in emergency news. That is LifeLine. Hello and welcome to the first inaugural episode of LifeLine with your host Erica. I'm your co-host Gary, and today we are going to be discussing certified training officers and how to make a dispatcher/call taker, right?
Yep, that's what we're going to talk about.
All right. So in the world today, a lot of people wonder, I think, what goes into making a 911 call taker or a 911 dispatcher, and what is the difference between those two jobs?
Well, the difference, I think we should start with what the difference is between the two. And I know it may sound obvious, but at least I think, when I'm reading articles or I'm watching, a television show or just in general conversation, you hear the 911 dispatcher. You rarely hear the 911 operator, or you hear them interchangeable. They're interchangeable.
Sure.
So most people, unless you're in the industry, you don't even know that they're two separate jobs. Mm-hmm. Most of the time, because actually it's pretty impossible to do both of them at the exact same time.
Yeah.
So imagine, picking up the phone and talking to a person on the phone who's having an emergency, and then talking to the field personnel at the same time. And if you can just imagine that phone sitting on your shoulder, and you've got your foot pedal and you're trying to do both of them.
Yeah, because I think most people kind of think of it like, I call 911 and help arrives, but there's a lot of pieces to that puzzle, right?
Yep, there are. And I would say, well, we all know the first component is definitely training. There's a lot of training that goes on. But what would you say? I think it starts with mindset, right? Or maybe what kind of person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because definitely there's not a lot of people that can listen to horrific calls day in, day out, and then, work to dispatch those particular calls. It's a very limited group of people that have the mental composure to do that.
Yes, and it is taxing. As a matter of fact, I think it would be safe to say, for all of you out there, we do this job every day. We work at 911, so we are actually just coming off of shift, and
a long shift,
a long one, and an intense one. I won't get into any details, but just think of a news day that you can remember, and we probably endured a lot of it, if not all of it or most of it. Mm-hmm. And how many people can come off of shift or come off of something like that and still be upbeat? Or what do you do when it's time for you to go home? How do you decompress? I think
drinking.
Sadly, a lot of people do that. A lot of people do that. Friday and Saturday night are definitely. I did that back in the day. I'm a little older now, so I.
So how many years have you been doing this job?
Whew. Way to date me, Gary.
Yeah, I'm just.
Way to put it out there. Just gonna throw me.
What's your expertise level?
Just throw me out there like that. Okay, let's see. So I started doing this work in 2000. Oh my God, it's 2023. Yeah, so give or take a few months in between relocating. Yeah, 23 years I've been doing this. That's insane.
It's a long time.
It's a long time.
I've been doing it since 2008, so it's 15 years.
Okay. So in the room.
4 different presidential administrations. Yikes.
Wow. That's awesome. I didn't think of it that way. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I started off as a, well, I had aspired to be a 911 operator, but what I was actually hired as was a 911 dispatcher or a police dispatcher, which takes us back to the very beginning. There is a difference between the two. One actually picks up the phone and says, where is your emergency, or what's the address of your emergency? And that's the person that you tell where you are and what the problem is. And then you have the police dispatcher or the dispatcher, which is oftentimes the person that speaks to the field personnel, whether that be a firefighter or an EMT or an actual police officer. That's the person that actually talks to them. And most of the time, they are not the same person. Yeah,
Because it's really two different skill sets.
it really is. Yes. So one, if we're talking about the person that answers the phone, they are what? They are the first responder. You hear that all the time, but it's actually quite true. They are the first person on scene, even though they're not physically there. They're the first pair of boots on the ground, if you will. They
Sure.
are the eyes, the ears of the people who are on the way to help. And they are relaying information to the other half of the equation, or the partner, if you will, in the first responder equation or partnership. You've got the person that gathers the information and relays it, and then you have the dispatcher person that tells the first responders, the field people, where to go,
Yeah.
where to go and what to do.
Yeah, I always like to think of it as sort of the 911 portion of it takes this big old cloud of chaos that is whatever the event is when the person calls 911, and they try and distill it down into what, the police, the fire, or the EMS are going to need to know in order to make sure everybody's safe and everything is secure.
Yeah.
And that's a definite skill to be able to figure out what's going on when you have partial, incomplete, and, frankly, sometimes people lie to you.
Oddly, yeah. Yeah, they do that. Funny how, I think that's human nature, though. Human nature always tells the story that is going to paint them in the best light. But then you also have people that are literally frightened.
Yeah.
They're terrified. They are, imagine someone breaking into your home. You are in your safe place. And I don't know about you, but I've had to call 911 before. Even as a 911 person, I've actually been on the other end of the phone, and I'm almost ashamed to admit it, but it's true. All of that knowledge, all of that skills, it just goes out the window, and I become the person I'm often trying to help.
Yeah.
So I get it. You are absolutely petrified, and people that I have worked alongside have now had to take their skills to help me. So it is a completely different skill set. You're absolutely right. You have to calm the person down. You have to get them to focus enough, or to come down out of their cloud of fear and frustration or anger, whatever that emotion is. You have to bring them down enough to be able to tell you what is going on, so that you can send them the help that they need. And that's a special skill set, because you have to be able to, I don't know, what's the word am I looking for? You have to be able to sift through.
Yeah, sort of like distill the essence of like the situation quickly
Yeah.
in 2 minutes or so.
And it is 2 minutes, and sometimes less than that, depending on the nature of the call.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, I guess to go back to where we first started, what does it take to do this kind of work? What kind of person does it take? Do you need nerves of steel, would you say?
No, because I think that once you take enough calls, you kind of begin to hopefully get into the process of, understanding that you're a cog in this machine to respond with help.
Okay.
So you're not sort of empathizing. You can sympathize, like understand people's frustrations or sorrows or fears, but you don't want to take those into yourself. Otherwise, you're just
Yeah.
going to be a emotional mess of a person.
That is so true. Okay. So, what would you say to the person that says, because I'm sure you have had people ask you, what do you do for a living, right? And as soon as you tell them what you do for a living, they go, ooh, what? Oh, I could never do that. Or, I'm too emotional. I would just get sucked in. Or they go, oh my God, what's the craziest call? It's hard to tell anybody the craziest call, because for one, if you've been doing it as long as we've been doing it, that's volumes 1, 2, 3,
Yeah.
4, 5, 6.
There's a lot of them.
There's a lot of them. But I always tell the person that says, I could never do that, I say to them, you would be surprised at the kind of people that come through this profession that would to look at them, you would not think this is what they do for a living.
Right.
I mean, you're mild mannered, shy, soft spoken. By the time you're done with this training, they morph into confident, assertive, interviewers. I don't know, is that the word I'm looking for?
Yeah. So because what the 911 operators are doing is just sort of conducting a really fast, quick initial investigation to
Yeah.
get the basics of whatever's happening. And,
That's true.
Yeah, and so you have to be kind of quick. You want to provide good customer service, but at the same time, you do need to move people along, because there might be other people trying to get through to 911.
That's so true. Yeah.
It may be more abrupt than other call centers, but
Yes.
there's a reason for that.
And I think you're 100% right, because when you think customer service, it's not the same customer service that you would experience when you call, let's say, your credit card company. When you call your credit
I
card
usually
company.
have really bad customer service with that, but okay, go ahead.
What? And that's, wow. I always have the nicest people. They're just, hi, how are you today?
It's because when I call, they're always wanting money. So
Well, they want money from me too, but they just have this, I don't know, they always seem to be the most upbeat. And you tell them, I mean, you can say, I don't know, I forgot to pay the bill. I'm so sorry to hear that. And they sound like they really mean, I'm so sorry to hear that, which amazes me, because I could never have that kind of compassion.
No, why didn't you pay your bill?
Why, what?
Yeah.
But that's the environment that we are. That's the environment we work in. We're just, we're straightforward. But it's a different type of customer service, because for us, the customer service is, I want to get you the help that you need, but I need this information from you. So I have to balance nice versus professional versus fact finding.
Yeah.
And I can't ask you, how was your day today?
Yeah.
Because it wouldn't be appropriate.
Yeah. And unlike other customer services, we don't want your repeat business.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's very true.
Yeah.
It's okay with me if I never speak to you again.
Yeah. At least in a emergency capacity.
Right. I don't want you to call these 3 digits to talk to me again. And if I've done it right, I hope you never have to call again.
Yeah.
But if you do, but the flip side to that customer service is, while I hope you never have to call again, if you do have to call, I need to be at my best every time you do call, or whoever calls. That's the other one. So I think that takes us into the responsibility
Sure.
of being on our game. That, and it can be as simple as getting enough rest,
Yeah.
taking care of yourself, so that when you walk through the doors and you put your headset on and it's time to go to work, you are the best version of yourself that you can be for whoever is next in line to pick up the phone, or
To call
I-
911.
to call 911. So I think that's a level of customer service.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Like if you walk away alive after calling our customer service line, then things are working well, right?
Things are working well. But we also know, I think, that you can offer not so great customer service. I think if we're talking to our colleagues, if we're all honest, we'll admit that we probably have had those days
Oh yeah, yeah.
when we have not given the citizen on the other end of the phone, or even that other field responder on the other end of the radio, the best version of ourselves.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, like everybody that works in emergency communications, I think is, we're all human. So for me, especially, like when I have like a bunch of like really not even difficult calls, but just difficult callers, like those that aren't cooperating with me, like
Yeah.
giving me the information
Yeah.
or screaming profanities
Yes.
for no reason. It's tough to maintain sort of I don't want to say a chipper attitude, because you
Right.
don't really have that
You
when
don't
you call
want-
in.
yeah.
But it's tough to keep that up for a long time.
It is, and I think that's part of us being human. That's human nature, and it does. Well, let's face it, this wears on you.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Take today, for instance. I walked in and I was fine, and about 4 o'clock, I was still fine. Around about 5:30, I was like, "Whew, it's getting deep in here."
Yes.
Right around 7, I was like, "Oh my God, where is 10 o'clock? Where is it?" And as the day, and that 3 hours between 7 and 10, it just kept coming, and it
Yes.
just would not stop. So by 10 o'clock, I felt like I was crawling out of the building, even though I was standing upright. Now, and that's just us doing what we do. We weren't even picking up the phone.
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. I mean, it definitely can take its attrition on people, and
Yeah.
that's why it's so important for emergency call centers to be well staffed, because you need to have that downtime between calls. So
Yes.
it's referred to as occupancy rate in call center businesses. But yeah, you want it like, you don't want it to be 80-85%. You want it probably somewhere around 50-55%,
Yeah.
because otherwise, it's going to be back-to-back calls, and that's tough on any
That
human being.
is, oh my gosh, and we have experienced that. And anybody that's worked anywhere, when it gets busy like that, or you have a major event or a critical incident, and it causes the citizens to call in at a higher rate, and more of them are calling about the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you're having to, we get to talk about answer rates, and talk times and all of those numbers. But the bottom line is it becomes very difficult to just press through all of those calls, because it's one after the other, after the other, after the other, and none of it's good.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, no one ever calls 911, like one of our colleagues always says. They never call to say, "Hey, I just got engaged." They're not calling us for that stuff.
I will say that I used to, years ago, I don't know if she's still alive anymore, but there was this lady that would call on Christmas and sing "We Wish You a Merry Christmas."
She
she's
sang?
Yeah. She was this really old lady,
That's
very
awesome.
sweet lady. So, I mean, I still remember that even, 14, 15 years later.
Gosh, that makes me think about, we had, I won't say her name, but I know that she's probably not alive now, because this was probably a good closer to 20 years ago. But she would call us around Christmas, around Thanksgiving, and she always wanted the officers to come by and pick up cookies that she baked for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, we never did that, but it was nice.
Yeah, it was a great sentiment.
It seemed nice, and I always thought, oh, I wish I could have some of her chocolate, because she would say chocolate chip cookies, and she would just name off all these different types that she baked, and I was like, every now and then she'd catch us hungry, like,
Yeah.
man, because in this well, depending, especially night shift,
Yeah.
where are you going to go to get food?
Pretty much McDonald's is your only
And
option.
this was back before there was no Postmates. There was no.
Yeah. They didn't have cell phones or computers.
It's true. Well, but wait a minute. They had computer. They had computers, but that was the size of, I don't know, most people's televisions. The monitors were that big, but there was only 4 squares within that space with which to work. I wish you guys could envision this. But just think of the movies from like 1980, 1985, or even like the early, I guess it would be the early 80s,
Yeah,
right?
it's basically war games, kind of.
Pretty much, yeah.
On a CRT monitor.
That's exactly what it looked like when I started. Thank you, Gary,
Wow, okay.
for
All
that.
right.
Well, we have it out there in the hall.
Yeah, I know. I've seen it in the picture books and the history books.
Wow, that's so messed up. But I actually worked on that, thank you very kindly.
Yep, with those
And
tandy monitors, just yellow and
Yes.
black.
Yes, yeah, and I'm telling you what, though, I didn't have to point or click at anything. If I told it to do it, I had a couple of commands. I said, do it, and it did it.
Well, I didn't have mice back then for input, so, you know. They
It's
probably did.
true. Wait, I don't remember having that. I don't think we got. That's making me crazy now. When did they invent those?
Oh, mice have been around for, well, I mean, I don't know. We'll have to look that up, I suppose. Yeah. But after the 911 call taker takes the call and tries to, you know, discern what's going on with it, what's the next person in the process do?
The next person is the dispatcher. So the 911 operator is, like he's saying, deciphering, discerning what's going on, and they are typing into the same system, and their colleague is the 911 or the police dispatcher, EMT dispatcher, or fire dispatch. They are now going to relay the information that's been given to them. And here's where it gets really interesting, because the 911 operator, yes, does condense that information down, but now the dispatcher has to condense it down even further.
Mm-hmm.
Now they have to take what I imagine. So I always like to think of it in my head, 20 sentences from the 911 operator now has to become 10 or less going out over the air to the from the dispatcher to the field officer or responder, because they don't have time to read it. They're on their way, and they're having to formulate their plan, and the dispatcher is a big part of that based on what they convey to them.
Right, absolutely, yeah, because even with all the changes in technology we've had in terms of mobile data computers, which they've had for many years, but
Right.
they've just gotten so advanced lately, like it'll plan out the officer's route. They don't even really need
Yeah.
to know the streets as much as they used to.
Yep.
You know, you can run returns, run warrants and such on them.
Yeah.
Like they're a lot better than they used to be, but you still need to have a person on the other end of that radio
Yes.
directing traffic, if you will.
Yes, and that's actually a really good way to put it. I've heard of the police or fire or even EMS, the dispatcher is quite literally directing traffic, truthfully, because you're keeping up with field responders, and you're directing and redirecting based on the priority of the call. I would like to just say, if you've got, let's just take a burglar alarm, for instance, just a regular burglar alarm, and your ADT burglar alarm goes off at someone's house, and you've got an officer en route there, and now this shooting comes out, or this stabbing comes out, or, I don't know, a disturbance involving some sort of violence, or even something that might escalate. The dispatcher is now having to take stock of the resources, the number of calls that they have, and now they are going, wait, I don't need to send over here. I take them off of this and send them over here. So it is literally directing traffic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's just basically what the dispatcher does is make sure the right amount of resources go to the most urgent call, just to keep life and property safe. And it can get really hectic, especially when on the few times that you run out of cops to send to calls, you have to make some decisions,
Yes.
and then you might have other parts of the city that need police officers on really important calls, so you have to send some of your cops over there.
Yeah, and that's where that directing traffic. But this becomes one of my favorite parts of the job is the teamwork that goes into that.
It does make the dream work.
It does make the dream work. And if public safety response is the dream, then yeah, you're absolutely right, because it takes the communication that happens between a room full of people that are responsible for their little slice of the city, but then we don't have all the same resources, but we still have to be mindful of what's going on next door and even across the city, so that we can send those resources, like you said, to the most urgent calls. And that means taking them away from this call that isn't so important. And it might be a matter of sending them 3 or 4 miles or even 10
Yeah.
to go handle something that has much more importance than the alarm that's going off in the moment.
Yeah, and it's tough, I think, to kind of hear hear the phrase like more important, because if the alarm's going off in your house and you're not there and you're wanting the cops to check it out, to you that's like really, really, really important. But when you look at it from, I think, a public safety standpoint, like a potential break into a house, especially if it's unoccupied, is much less of a priority than, say, someone threatening to jump off a bridge, or somebody running around town shooting up the place.
Yeah.
So they're tough choices to make in this industry, and a lot of times you have to choose the least worst option rather than the best.
Absolutely. And I know, too, someone who isn't in this industry, that may sound a lot of times like we're being really, is callous really the right word? Or
calloused or calculating.
Calculating
cold. Some C word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But and that's actually true, because, and I think you have to think about it in terms of life over property, and then you have to start prioritizing what level of property, how much property.
Yeah.
And, life is always going to be a thing. But take, for instance, an argument between neighbors that are separated. They're yelling at each other over the fence.
Yeah.
Okay. That's not great.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily want to ignore that, right? Because they could cross the fence.
They could, yeah.
They could cross the fence.
Like, it could get worse.
And then it could get worse. And then I'm watching that situation to make sure that it doesn't go completely sideways. But I also don't want to ignore that prowler that is lurking around someone's home. I don't know if someone's there or not, right? So I have to make that split-second decision. And I have all of these things going on in my head. Okay, is anybody home? Do we know if anyone's home? I kind of have to decide that I'm going to send help to that potential prowler because, one, it has a priority. That's another thing. You have protocols and standard operating procedures and priorities, and I don't know if I said that already, but you just have all of these
sort of SOPs, standard operating procedures.
Yeah, SOPs to consider, and then you also have the critical thinking component.
Yeah, and that's that you can't teach people to critical think.
No, you can't.
And you need that both as a call taker and a dispatcher.
You do. And some people may argue against this, but I never say that you should not go with your SOPs. You should, but the critical thinking component sometimes will cause you to have to think just a little bit outside of that. Because what happens when you are faced with a situation that doesn't necessarily fit neatly into the SOP? I like to think of the SOP of it's a sunny day. It's 75 degrees.
Yep.
The wind is blowing just enough to rustle your hair.
Yes.
And, you can smell the
lilies of the field.
Lilies of the field, and it's just the rainbows, and there's bunnies and everything. This is what you do when all of those things are falling into place.
Yes, under optimal conditions.
Optimal conditions. But I don't know about you, Gary. I don't work in optimal
No, especially
conditions.
not today.
Not today. Today was the day that was not optimal.
So let me ask you this. What would you say are some qualities that you, as somebody who's been in the industry a long time, would look for if you were going to try and recruit people to be either a 911 call taker or a dispatcher?
One of the first things I notice, like if I'm at the grocery store or the convenience store or anything, I'm looking for someone, funny enough, not nice. I'm not looking for nice. I'm looking for decisive.
Okay.
I'm looking for someone, I will notice someone who is quick on their feet. And maybe not someone who makes the perfect decision, but will make a decision. I'm always attracted to the person who's helping me, or the person, or in persons when I'm just kind of going about my life and I'm looking around and I'm like, they might be in the wrong job. I might
Yeah.
need to slide them a piece of paper, because I noticed they had a set of circumstances presented to them and they didn't run, go get the manager. They at least tried
Yeah.
to work it out. And they realized, okay, I'm in over my head. I might have to go get some help. But they didn't just throw in the towel and go, oh, I need to go get the manager because I can't think for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're willing to make a decision, and that, you really can't teach people that. That's got to, by the time they're adults, at least it's hard. You
Yeah.
know? It's
Yeah.
got to be an innate confidence that they have in
Yes.
themselves.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean not be teachable, but when you make a decision, go with it.
Yes.
Because there's a saying, don't let the perfect ruin the good. Meaning,
Yes.
you don't want to just not do anything because it
That's
won't
good.
be perfect.
That's good.
Yeah, it's perfect.
I like that.
Sometimes you just have to make the best decision you can.
Yeah.
Especially in this industry, given limited, inaccurate, and oftentimes conflicting information.
Very much so. Very
And
much so.
Do the best that you can.
Yeah. And I think, and I'm sure you probably have told trainees this the same many times. I've told them, I don't need you to make the perfect decision. I just need you to make one.
Right.
Given everything that you have been given, I think, I don't know, critical thinking to me is, if I had to try to give a definition that's coming right out of my head, I would say critical thinking is making a decision using all of the information you've been given up to this point, like say from the classroom all through training, and now you're on your own. Everything that you've been taught from the very first day all the way up to now, take all of those lessons, apply it to this situation, now make a choice.
So, Erica, if people are interested, where can they find you?
They can find me, my email address is erica@ameriprep.com, and that is actually a company that is, its sole purpose is training and preparation for 911 professionals, and the formal name of the company is American Emergency Preparedness, and you can Google that and it will take you right to the main site. They do in-person classes, webinars on anything you can think of within the 911 profession, from CTO certification classes to webinars on CTO best practices. We do leadership academies, 911 call taking, critical response training, active shooter. I mean, you name it, you can find it there. And again, they do in-person 4-hour trainings and also webinars, which is really what I do. I do CTO, I do burnout. I guess best way, burnout, and how to prepare your trainees for being evaluated. Also, feedback. That's another one that I'm working on, because that is a challenge, giving feedback in a way that is helpful to the trainee. So that is another big one that will be coming up. But again, www.americanemergencypreparedness.com. And again, Erica@ameriprep.com. Shoot me a line.
Okay, a great spot to find additional training if you're needing any, or You're just curious about the profession. Well, everyone, thank you for joining us on this week's episode of LifeLine. We have appreciated being with you. I'm Gary.
And I'm Erica.
And we will see you next week. Thank you for listening to our podcast of Lifeline 911. You can find us on Facebook at Lifeline 911 Podcast. We're also available on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, and everywhere podcasts are hosted. If you have a question, please feel free to send us an email. This has been a production of Lifeline 911 Podcast, copyright 2023.